Number 11. Kayla Massa. On February 13, 2020, federal authorities in New Jersey apprehended Kayla Massa. You may also know Kayla as @KGoldie, or you would if you were one of her 300,000 private Instagram followers. The reason Kayla was arrested was that, according to unsealed documents from a New Jersey federal court, she was the orchestrator of a scheme. Her scheme involved scamming 45 of her followers on social media out of over $1.5 million. Most of the victims of Kayla's scam were under the age of 18. Here's how the scam unfolded. Kayla posted photographs of money orders and huge stacks of cash to her Instagram stories. These stories made it appear as though Kayla were rich. The stories also came with instructions for her followers to empty their bank accounts and provide Kayla with their debit cards and their PIN numbers. This way, the victims would supposedly be unable to lose any money while giving Kayla access to their accounts. The reason they would give Kayla access to their accounts was because they thought she was going to give them money. It was all a huge ruse to use their accounts for fraudulent activity. Kayla, once in possession of the debit card and the PIN number, would allegedly deposit a huge fraudulent check. She would then withdraw the cash from her victim's bank account before the bank realized anything was wrong. By the time the bank and her victims figured out she had tricked them, her victims were stuck with a huge bill and being accused by the bank of committing fraud. When they reached out to Kayla, she blocked her victims on social media and then used the money she stole to buy luxury cars and clothes. Kayla is currently accused of these crimes and has been charged, but there is yet to be a verdict. Kayla allegedly worked with 9 co-conspirators, but it's been over 2 years and nothing definitive has happened yet. Number 10. DAmico and McClure. In 2019, DAmico from New Jersey pled guilty for organizing a cruel scam on the public. He and his girlfriend at the time, McClure, conspired to earn themselves some money by appealing to the public's sense of goodness. They were the ones behind the GoFundMe scam, raising $400,000 by tricking people into thinking the money was going to be donated to a homeless veteran. Instead, the money went to Mark and Caitlin. A little chunk of change went to the homeless man, but it was all a big charade. The incident itself occurred in 2017. Mark and Caitlin created the GoFundMe account after she allegedly ran out of gas near the interstate in Philadelphia. When she ran out of gas, she bumped into a man named Johnny Bobbitt, according to their original story. The homeless veteran only had $20 to his name, but he used it to pay for her fuel. It was such a heartwarming story that they earned almost $500,000 through the campaign. The original goal was $10,000, so they clearly blew way past that. 14,000 people donated out of the goodness of their hearts, but it was all a lie. 14,000 people thought they were doing a good deed. In reality, they were paying for casino gambling, a new BMW, a trip to Las Vegas for New Year's, Louis Vuitton handbags, and a casual helicopter ride over the Grand Canyon. That's only some of the things the money was spent on, according to the prosecutor's office. Things turned sour in 2018 when Johnny, the homeless man, filed a lawsuit against the couple. He accused them of withholding the funds and only offering him a measly $75,000. That wasn't even a quarter of the money they made through the campaign. They stiffed the one guy who could sell them out, and so that was exactly what he did. Mark got 5 years in prison, and Caitlin got 1 year. They were also ordered to pay back all the money to GoFundMe. Number 9. Sarah Deisley. 5 years after masterminding a sophisticated scheme to earn herself nearly $600,000, Sarah Deisley was arrested. The former St. George bank worker supposedly used her position at the bank to steal money, transfer it into multiple fake accounts, and then spend that money herself. Following her arrest in December of 2020, she was seen in tears, crying because she would spend Christmas locked up in jail and away from her 2 sons. When bail was denied in a central local court, Sarah practically had a meltdown. This all happened in Australia, and it started in 2016. The court heard allegations that Sarah began her crime spree by stealing driver's licenses from people in New South Wales and Victoria. Then she used their details to create fake bank accounts where she worked, leaving herself in full control of all the accounts. The court then heard from Constable Brendan Kitchener about how Sarah was the one behind the whole thing and that she had two patsies working under her, both of whom have also been arrested. When Sarah was initially arrested, she was loaded into the back of a police van wearing a grey onesie and designer gold slides. As she stepped into the holding cell in the van, Sarah muttered, "Ew," and luckily for her, she didn't have to spend much time behind bars. She was allowed out on a bond of $1.5 million shortly after her arrest. In 2022, she was brought up on 237 charges, most involving dishonestly gaining a financial advantage by deception. Even with all the charges, Sarah is currently free and waiting for the case to end. She's either going to be allowed to remain free, or she'll spend a significant amount of time locked in a cell. Number 8. The Nigerian Prince. You may have heard about the legendary Nigerian Prince email scam. These were huge scams that appeared in the early days of email. People all over the world were receiving messages from an alleged Nigerian prince or high official who had too much money and wanted to give some of it away. And while there were probably quite a few Nigerian prince scammers out there, one of them was busted recently in Louisiana. In December of 2017, Michael New was arrested in connection to a scam in which he wired money on behalf of a fake Nigerian official with a fake inheritance. Michael was facing 269 counts of wire fraud and money laundering. The investigation into Michael was a long one, spanning over 18 months according to the Slidell Police Department in Louisiana. Michael was not the head of the Nigerian Prince scamming organization, only a middleman. He was responsible for obtaining money from scam victims, then wiring that money to his co-conspirators, who live, believe it or not, in Nigeria. Here's the way the scam went according to the Federal Trade Commission. It all started with an email from an alleged Nigerian official in need of financial assistance. This fake official claimed to be on the brink of a huge inheritance but needed a bit of financial help to get it. And while a lot of people may laugh at the scam, after all, it has been an international joke for years, people do still fall victim to it. The scam is a serious crime, and the victims are real, warm-blooded humans. Millions of dollars a year are lost to these Nigerian prince scams. It's not clear exactly how much money Michael made for his part in this scheme, but it's safe to say he won't be the last middleman to scam unsuspecting victims. Number 7. Billy McFarland. Billy McFarland is the man behind the Fire Festival fraud. He was the brains behind the most infamous bad party in modern memory, and although he was supposed to be incarcerated until August of 2023, he's already out. Billy was placed into the residential re-entry management on March 30th, 2023. He's already allegedly planning another festival and even hiring out his consulting services online for $1,800 an hour. Billy has been out of jail for less than a month at the time this video was made, and he's already working toward another festival and trying to make some serious money. If you're a bit foggy on what happened with the Fire Festival, here's a recap. Billy McFarland organized the party music festival of the century alongside rapper Ja Rule. The party was billed as the ultimate luxury experience. It was supposed to be the biggest bash for Instagram influencers ever thrown. Millennials, influencers, party-hungry socialites, everyone was going to be there. The event was promoted by people like Kendall Jenner and Hailey Baldwin, who were paid for their support of the event. Everything on paper was good, but in reality, Billy was not a man to be trusted. He misled his investors and failed to deliver on every single thing he promised. There was a festival, yes, but it wasn't anything like it was supposed to be. In 2018, Billy told federal prosecutors he underestimated the resources required for producing an event of that magnitude. People spent thousands of dollars on tickets. They expected to watch Blink-182 and rub shoulders with celebrities. Instead, they found themselves stuck on an island in refugee tents filled with styrofoam boxes. Billy was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, but only served 4. Number 6. Kevin Trudeau. In early 2023, TV fraudster Kevin Trudeau narrowly avoided returning to federal lockup for skipping a court date. And although the judge allowed him to stay out of jail, it might not last forever. US authorities have demanded that Kevin start paying off his $37 million fine immediately. If he doesn't, he could be back behind bars. But who in the world is Kevin Trudeau anyway? He was the original fraud man, convicted in the early 1990s of larceny and credit card fraud. But he's most famous now for his late-night infomercials. He made a fortune selling everything from health and financial advice to people using late-night TV. He promoted books about how to lose weight, along with other sensitive subjects that Kevin may know very little about. In 2007, he was accused of misrepresenting the contents of one of his books. Just a few years before, Kevin had agreed to pay a fine of $500,000 and to stop marketing most of his products. It was agreed that he was swindling people out of their money by offering them essentially nothing of value and lying about his products. The only thing he was allowed to continue selling were his books because they were, and still are, protected under the First Amendment. He could have gotten away clean after making a huge fortune. Instead, Kevin continued to swindle people out of their money. In 2011, he was fined almost $40 million for violating the order given to him in 2004 to stop selling his products. And in 2013, the same thing happened. He claimed insolvency and filed for bankruptcy. This was despite FTC lawyers believing him to be hiding money in shell companies. The FTC cited Kevin spending almost $400 on a haircut as an example of him still being rich, something a bankrupt person probably wouldn't do. All that messing around caught up to Kevin in November of 2013. He was finally convicted of criminal contempt. Kevin was given 10 years in a federal prison and got an early release in 2022. But if he doesn't start paying off that fine, he could go back to jail. Number 5. Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes was the CEO of Theranos. She enjoyed an unprecedented amount of wealth, which she earned by scamming people out of their money. But on April 27, 2023, Elizabeth Holmes will begin her 11-year prison sentence. She lost her bid to remain free. Elizabeth will now be spending the foreseeable future in a Texas minimum security prison camp. Let's take a deeper look at Elizabeth and figure out what she did. Those close to Elizabeth described her as intensely competitive from a young age. Even when she was just a little girl, she played Monopoly fiercely with her younger brother and her cousin. She would even insist on playing until the very end, collecting cash and properties until she was the master of Monopoly. And if she lost, she was one of those people who would flip the board. Elizabeth founded the company Theranos in 2003 at the age of 19. The company was something straight out of science fiction. Elizabeth promised her investors that they were creating extremely advanced proprietary technology. Their technology would allow blood tests to run using only a single pinprick of blood from a finger. Using the company's special tech, that single drop of blood would be able to detect all kinds of medical conditions, even cancer. She operated the company for a decade in almost complete secrecy, accepting money from backers but keeping the company in the shadows. Elizabeth was a sensation. She was hardly into her 20s and was already appearing on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and doing TED Talks. She and her family were making millions of dollars. In 2013, the company had a valuation of $10 billion. Then in 2015 came the investigations. Medical professionals and investigative journalists were starting to suspect Theranos was not doing anything. It turned out the company was a fraud. They didn't have any devices that could detect diseases. Every claim Elizabeth made was a lie. Her personal net worth dropped from $4.5 billion to practically zero. She had fun in her 20s, but she'll be spending the next decade in jail. Number 4. Yusei Rosello Tirado. In Michigan, Yusei Rosello Tirado was facing charges for scamming people out of their money. Yusei is in his 40s and lives in Miami, but he was arrested in April of 2022 in Hazel Park when he tried to meet with a courier. According to the cops, the courier was collecting money from scam victims. Let's break it down from the very beginning. Police started their investigation when a senior citizen in Shelby Township received a mysterious call. The caller said her granddaughter was involved in an accident and could be in major trouble with the law. Money was needed for her granddaughter to get out of the legal pickle, otherwise it would be bad news. This is a fairly common scam in which somebody tries to frighten an elderly person into paying money to protect one of their grandchildren. But this time, the scammer met his match. When the courier went to the victim's house to pick up the money, the cops were ready. The courier was identified, and the cops intercepted the courier transferring the money to Yusei. Then the scammer was taken back to jail. The police found 3 other victims in the vicinity who had all been scammed at the same time, and luckily they were able to get their money back. It wasn't a very big scam, but big enough that UC made around $20,000 in cash from bullying senior citizens. Number 3. Ashok Jadeja. Ashok Jadeja was able to swindle money from thousands of victims across India using what might seem like a rather unusual method. Ashok was a self-proclaimed godman, able to bestow blessings upon an individual for a little bit of money. He was notorious for sitting outside the Sukata Mati temple in the Indian state of Gujarat. Outside the temple, he would tell people that if they gave him money, the goddess Vahanvati Sukata Mata would make them wealthy. Ashok claimed to have divine powers. He would lure the weakest and most susceptible victims he could find into participating in a ritual. These people would have to contribute whatever they could, and then Ashok would pay back whatever they spent threefold. This allowed him to gain the trust of his victims and rip them off for even more money. He became so good at swindling religious believers out of their cash that he had 35 accomplices following his instructions. This might sound outrageous, but India is a deeply religious country. For somebody to say they are divine can go a fairly far distance, but to fake it can get you in big trouble. Ashok was arrested in 2009 along with his wife for scamming people. Only once in police custody did he finally admit to having no godly powers. Number 2. Charles Barry. Charles Barry was the subway scammer who in 2020 was arrested for the 141st time. Charles was what we call a serial scammer. He made his living by tricking tourists in New York City into exchanging cash for an expired Metro card. Expired cards are easy enough to find, and tourists are generally easy enough to spot. During his most recent arrest, Charles targeted a 23-year-old tourist. He introduced himself as an MTA worker while the target was at the vending machine about to purchase a Metro card. Thinking she was dealing with a real agent, the tourist forked over $32 for a non-functioning card. By the time she realized she had been scammed, Charles Barry was long gone. But it didn't matter how far he went, the cops easily caught up to him. Seeing as he was already arrested 140 times for scamming people, the cops knew exactly who to look for. The 56-year-old was, and probably still is, notorious for trolling the subways as an expert conman. Even though he was facing charges of fraudulent accosting, Charles wasn't looking at any hard time in jail or any prolonged time away from the subway. Number 1. The other Kayla Massa. In the winter and spring of 2022, the Upper Merion Police Department received reports from local residents saying they had been the victims of a mail scam. People had their checks missing and couldn't seem to find their mail. As it turned out, 4 individuals were busy stealing mail, committing check fraud, and costing the residents of Upper Merion over $600,000. But probably the weirdest part of the story is that one of the individuals involved in the crime was named Kayla Massa. And no, she is not in any way connected to the Instagram celeb who also participated in an alleged scam and is named Kayla Massa. The scam involved stealing mail from US Postal Service mailboxes in front of people's houses, and overnight drop boxes at the local USPS facility. Authorities say victims realized they had been duped when their checks never showed up, then were suddenly cashed somewhere else in Philadelphia or even in another state. Many of these checks were mailed by residents as payment for taxes, medical procedures, and other extremely important things. Imagine trying to pay your bill only to have someone lift a check as it's in the mail and deposit it in their own bank account. It was brutal for the people of Upper Merion. Thankfully, the local police department has their own internet crime and technology unit, which led to the identification of the 4 suspects. Police arrested Devin Broughton, John Klotz, Kayla Massa, and Joshua Cruz. They were responsible for ripping off at least 51 victims, but the case is still ongoing. Would you rather get scammed over the phone or fall victim to a fake GoFundMe? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Remember to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon for more awesome videos from the channel.